We need to talk about ethics. We can no longer ignore it. We have to talk about it. Specifically, the ethics of realism. So, right, I guess you've all heard about those deep fake videos that are made more often and more often. Here you see one, perhaps not. Is this a real video? Did you really watch me in the previous series of video clips? Videotaping myself, or is this perhaps a fake video? Did I never visit this lab actually? How to know, right? How can you tell? I can tell you that this was real, but you would have to trust me. Can you trust me in this case? I don't know. So those deep fake videos, they make use of those deep learning algorithms. They record people's speech. They record a lot of people's speech. And on the basis of this speech, for instance, they will then generate a spoken message that has the same sound in it, that has the same structure perhaps, that very much looks like an actual sentence, an actual spoken message. The same for nonverbal behavior. So an algorithm can really track all my movements for a certain period of time and then generate a clip using all this knowledge based on this deep learning algorithm of a person that looks like me and acts like me and behaves like me, even though I never made those very movements myself in that way, in that order. So, right, this of course raises all sorts of ethical issues, right? If we can no longer trust whether a video is real or not, how should we handle those kind of videos? How can we find out whether something is real or not? Well, much of those techniques that are used for deepfake videos, those algorithms are also more and more used in virtual reality. And you can imagine that this even creates a more convincing story, a more convincing experience, if you don't just see a deepfake video, but a deepfake 3D experience of someone actually telling you something, even though that person, that virtual person, perhaps never said this in their real life, or never acted like that in their real life in that specific. Well, this is all also related to realism, right? So if I look at the recent experimental studies, in this case in psycholinguistics, so people who are studying how we use language, what kind of mental processes are going on when we use language, then only a couple of years ago, virtual agents or avatars looked a bit like this, so quite cartoonish, right? So you can still, when you see them, you sort of know that those are not actual people, right? You may forget this for a while, you may suspend your disbelief. Still, if you look at those, you sort of realize, well, they're not real, right? You know, in the back of your mind, you know, they're not real. Now, what if you look at this more recent virtual agent that's called Mica, developed by this company, Magic Leap, that's very much investing in augmented reality glasses. So you wear those glasses, and now all of a sudden you see your virtual assistant popping up in the real world who looks like this. That's already way more realistic, right? So if I hadn't told you this, maybe you would have thought this is just a picture of a normal person. Well, actually it's not. So this realism in terms of virtual agents and avatars increases really rapidly. So those virtual agents and avatars become more and more naturalistic very quickly. So then the question is, at some point we may perhaps reach a point where you can no longer tell the difference between an actual person and a digital version of a person, where you cannot distinguish an actual person from a virtual person that sort of also surrounds you. And what they say themselves is that this Mica, who already looks very much like an actual person, is only the beginning. And this technology is advancing so quickly that you can imagine. And in a couple of years, perhaps we already reached the point where you encounter a virtual agent, where you're wearing this augmented reality glasses, perhaps, and you can no longer tell whether this is a real person or a virtual person. So you will know if you take off your glasses, because then the virtual person will be gone and the real person will still be there. But still, this also sort of highlights that different people may have different everyday experiences. That's already the case, right? We all experience the same world in a different way. If you're standing in front of a tree and I'm also standing in front of the same tree, it is the same tree, but we still experience something different. Maybe you're really someone who knows a lot about trees, so you will see different things compared to me, who doesn't know too much about trees. So already we experience the world in different ways, but that world is still the same for both of us. in a sense. Whereas if you're every day interacting with this virtual agent and I am not, then still we don't experience the same things, but also the world that we experience in itself is already different. Now, what does that then do to, for instance, things like the common ground that we share, the kind of things that we share? If you're experiencing a totally different world with all sorts of different virtual elements compared to the world that I'm experiencing, this is maybe lead to a situation where we can no longer really talk to each other because you're experiencing such a different everyday life compared to me. And what now happens if, as I said, it's no longer very easy to tell whether something is real or whether it's different, whether it's digital? What does this do to your everyday experiences? What will happen if this digital person that looks very much like a real person tells you a very convincing story that is actually fake, but you no longer really realize this because this person looks so real, it's so convincing? What does this do to your everyday life? Many questions. I don't have the answers. It's also very much related to this idea of living in a simulation, right? So if we can no longer tell what's real and what's fake, what's digital, what will this do to sort of the human condition that we all know? What will this do to our lives? Is this something that we should want? Should we want a world where we can no longer really easily distinguish between what is real and what is digital? There might be all sorts of nice advantages to the fact that there can be things like virtual assistants that look very real. They can do all sorts of tasks for us. They can order a pizza for us, saves us some time. But do we really want that? Because it might also come at a cost, right? It might sort of create situations where our sort of common ground is gone. We might rely even more on digital aspects of everyday technology. Do we want that? Many ethical questions. It's always good to think about those things and also keep them sort of in the back of your mind. If you're reading about new developments, new updates, technically perhaps things can be done, but does that also mean that we should want that those things start to appear? Should we want those things in our lives?